Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amber and this is Fundy Freed. Before we get started today, I want to remind you that if you like what I'm doing and you want to support the channel, I would love it if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified every time a new episode comes out. I put out full episodes every Friday and I upload some shorts here and there throughout the week. It is a little bit of a challenge going on right now. My goal is to hit 500 subscribers, and if I hit 500, I am going to do a Hot Ones type challenge where I eat hot wings or hot sauce or however you want to put it while doing Bible trivia and answering Bible questions. So that could be very entertaining because I am a big wimp when it comes to spicy things, and so I will be crying and a lot of things with that. Today we're going to continue my story. This will be my story part 2, and if you haven't seen part 1 yet, I will put it up here on one of these sides for you to click on so you can see part 1 of my story if you're interested in looking at that. Pick up where we left off. I ended about midway or towards the end of my high school time last time, and so we'll pick up there and we'll move into my early marriage years. So I was homeschooled all of my life up until 10th grade, and so for the last 2 years of high school I went to a tiny Christian school in Athens. The principal pastor there unfortunately was a predator and groomed and sexually assaulted many girls in his career from 1996 up into the present. He was caught having an affair with one of the Mary teachers. The church forgave him and let him keep his role, and recently has been arrested and put into jail and charged along with an accomplice he groomed from the time she was about 10 for inappropriate things. After I graduated high school, which was a fun graduating class of 3, I decided that I wasn't going to go to college right away. I went ahead and got an actual job at a call center. It was around that time that my dad decided that he was going to become a missionary again and a church planner back to Montana. Had just enrolled and completed my first semester at a local Christian college. I had started kind of establishing my life there and I didn't want to leave. I made the choice to stay in Tennessee versus move to Montana. And that was met with a lot of people who were against that because they didn't want me to be out from underneath the headship of my dad without getting married. I decided to move in with my best friend, and her family at the time was Seventh-day Adventist. So on top of the fact I was leaving, I also was moving in with someone who they considered to be in a cult. There was a lot of adversity whenever it came to me moving in there. Time came for me to move. My dad packed all my stuff up from my room into the van, drove it down to the little house in Athens, and unpacked my stuff and waved at me, didn't even hug, and said, "See you next time." That was probably the last time I heard from him for about 6 months. It was kind of his MO. If I did anything against what he wanted, I got the silent treatment. I didn't really hear from anybody for about 6 months. The first 6 months I was on my own. During that time, I kind of dated off and on different people, and towards that summer, I got a message from, I had kind of inadvertently met a couple years prior at a youth event, and he had hit me in the face with a dodgeball and blacked my eye. He was a little younger than me, and he messaged me and he was like, "Hey, do you want another rematch for dodgeball? LOL." And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And we just kind of laughed it off. And he invited me out to lunch and a movie. I was like, sure, I'll go out. I wasn't really in the mood for like committed dating, and I wasn't really interested in him at the time. But I was like, hey, I'm living on my own, free meal. It would be fantastic. But I was at this point looking at getting my own apartment up in Knoxville just to make the commute much easier since I worked up there. And so he's like, great, let's go meet to Quaker Steak, which was a wing place, which I think is hysterical now looking back for first date was wings. Then we went and saw Get Smart. We get to the wing place and he shows up in a cowboy hat, big giant buckle, the jeans, the western shirt, and the cowboy boots. True cowboy from Montana, right? We go in and I'm like, I'm gonna go all in. I don't really care. So I ordered all the wings I could and I'm eating it like crazy, and I have barbecue sauce everywhere, not even remotely cute. It was just a very easy conversation. It was the first time I'd ever been around someone male that made me feel safe and just at ease with myself. I remember leaving the movies going, oh my gosh, that guy is the person I'm gonna marry. And I was like, no, it's not. Because I had that before, and I was like, maybe I'm just crazy. He messaged me later and he was like, hey, I had a great time, let's go out again. And came very clear that it was turning into something, and it did. We dated for 6 months and it was a really good time. I lived on my own for a while. After that 6 months, he proposed and we got married 6 months later. At that point, my family had started talking to me again. My dad, my mom came in. My brothers weren't able to make it, but my parents came in. My dad walked me down the aisle, preached at the ceremony. From what I knew at the time, he had started doing a lot better, my dad had. So everything seemed okay. Sam and I bought our first house and we moved in about a month after we got married. Both working at the same place. Everything was going great. And I remember that time just being really happy for the first time in my life. Adjusting into life of being married, and he was just really easy to live with and just so attentive and understanding and kind. It was just wonderful. About 8 months into our marriage, we got news that our site that we were working at for GMAC was getting outsourced to India, and so we lost our jobs. We took that as the opportunity, as God's will, and I really think at this point now it really was just in a roundabout way for him to join the military. He always wanted to be in the military, and we talked to a recruiter, and the recruiter talked to us about everything, and we were so young, and he signed the papers and he decided to go infantry. We knew we had limited time before he left. We just spent that next couple months. Hey, baby. There you go, baby. We just spent that next couple months just really making as many memories as we possibly could. He left on the day after Mother's Day, or on Mother's Day. That was a really hard thing. I had developed a very strong codependent relationship with him. Losing him and him leaving was just very, very difficult. I remember someone telling me, well, this is just the first of many times he's gonna leave, and it's just getting used to the future. And honestly, every time he left, it never got easier. Okay, this is Editing Amber here. I just want to remind you of the trigger warning. I'm getting to a part of my story that talks about unaliving attempts, postpartum depression, PTSD, and various things of that nature. So I want to give you an opportunity to be able to stop here or move on to a different video. I'll put a different set of playlists up, but this is your trigger warning here. After basic training was done, he got a family weekend, and in that weekend, I ended up pregnant. Shortly after I found out I was pregnant, I lost that baby. That was really hard. I miscarried at home and was very much alone and by myself. That was very painful, and I felt very guilty. And so I remember writing him saying, I'm really sorry, this is what happened. And he was just like, it's okay, it's no big deal, things happen, I love you, that kind of thing. I had to come home for 2 weeks after he graduated basic. We found out that we were going to be stationed in Germany. And honestly, I was really excited. I'm a big history person, and I was really excited to go to Europe. I got the paperwork started very quickly while he was in AIT to get going, and I was very naive at that point that the military takes forever and a day times 1,000, especially when it comes to spouses. After 2 weeks, we drove down to Atlanta and we watched him fly away, and I honestly walked away thinking I was going to be with him within a month. And that was not the case. A month in, feeling really weird, so I took a pregnancy test and I found out I was pregnant. I was really excited. I told him and everything progressed great. It wasn't until he left in August, it wasn't until December, about a week and a half before Christmas, before I could fly to Germany. They got everything worked out. A church helped me buy a ticket to fly to Germany because they were actually wanting to wait until like the next year. And they got me there. I got there in December of 2010. It was a complete culture shock. Riding in the car on the Autobahn for the first time and seeing just billboards of like nudity, which, you know, in Europe it's not considered nudity. It's just things that were just so different. And we drove to our house and I just remember being so happy to be with him and be with him for Christmas. Then his training began. He was going from infantry to into mortar, and so he was gone every week, home on the weekends. I was very alone. I was very isolated. I had joined a forum at the time trying to get to know people in Graph. Because of my IFB standards, I started seeing myself as better than them. I did not want to be a part of people who drank or smoked or partied or swore. And because all of these people did this, I kept myself set apart and very isolated and alone. I just look back on that period of just being, I cannot believe stuck up I was. I'm just like, I'm ashamed of the actions that I took in pushing people away and feeling better than people. And because I wasn't, I understand I didn't know how to carry myself any differently, but it was just not good. Oldest was due May 19th. She decided to come a couple weeks later. That was a really hard time. We found out right around the time of the due date that Sam was going to be deploying within a few weeks. At 42 weeks, my water broke. I went into the hospital and had a very long, arduous labor that turned into a very traumatic birth, where I could feel them cut me open for the emergency C-section. They ended up putting me under to get her out, and I woke up with the baby being pushed to my breast saying, congratulations, you're a mom now. And I'm like, I fell asleep and there was a baby inside me, and I woke up, there's a baby in my arms. And then I ended up with an infection and in the hospital for another week after that. That was just very traumatic and very trying. Of course, I kept myself happy and upbeat because I didn't want Sam to leave with the stress, knowing I was stressed out having a baby, but I was petrified having a baby alone in a foreign country with no support system. The church that we went to, the nearest one was 2.5 hours away because I refused to go to a church that did not have a King James only Bible. Again, isolated myself. Sam deployed. Our daughter was 6 weeks old. Within the first month, there was a misunderstanding incident happened that kind of put us into a bit of a setback. That was when things changed. And I could feel it. I could feel that it changed. Whenever I would talk to him, there was no more joy in his voice. He wasn't really connecting. I mean, he talked to us, but the Sam that I knew, the Sam that I loved, the Sam that I married was not the Sam that was there anymore. The year progressed, and more obvious things that there was just something off. I struggled very hard, very much raising a daughter by myself that first year. I went back to the States for a little bit and spent time with family, but I just knew something was not right. And he came back for R&R, which is like rest and recuperation or whatever, for 2 weeks. All superficial, like I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't there. Whenever he went back, mental health went drastically downhill. I would talk to him and I would get off the phone with him and I would just curl up in a ball and cry and just pray that there was some way or someone that would be able to help him, because I was so far away and I couldn't do anything. There was nothing I could do because I knew he wasn't opening up to me. We got word in May when he was coming back on my birthday, and I was so excited. And we'd had like a reintegration type meeting where they were like, you're going to have a honeymoon phase and then things are really going to hit the fan. So be watching for these particular signs. Came back and they were right. We had 30 days almost to the day, just being happy and reintegrating and our daughter getting to know him. It was just a beautiful time. We went on vacation together down to a resort down near the Alps. It was just beautiful. It was after that month into July now, things started changing. Things started slipping up He got really jumpy, really angry, would yell, would lose his temper really easily. Just wasn't the same anymore. And I could see that he was not okay. I had no tools or idea how to help. Like, mental health help was not a thing for us. We were taught that getting help outside of a church was wrong and sinful, and we just needed to pray harder. He was not in a place to even pray, let alone pray harder, and I just didn't know what to do. One day I came home and found him after an attempt, called his leadership, and they decided that it would be best for him to be institutionalized 4.5 hours away on the other side of the country. And because of how I was raised, that we hid every problem from the outside world, I didn't talk to anybody about it. And so whenever we made the phone call to his family that this is what we were having to do, whether intentionally or unintentionally, there was a great accusatory tone in the fact that I didn't catch it and I didn't stop it. Putting him in this situation now where he was being institutionalized, I was going to put him in a drugged up state where he was going to get hooked on things, and I should have just caught things sooner. I remember him curled up in our floor, packing a bag, just crying and asking me to please not take him or not send him away, that he would be okay, that he would be better. And here I was, 24, 25, alone. This situation that I had never been even remotely prepared to handle at all. And having to tough love and become a caregiver to someone who, in my mind, was supposed to be my leader. Everything changed in that moment. So we sent him off. He wasn't allowed to talk to me for the first 24 hours. And then he finally was able to call me, and I would talk to him. I'd be happy and upbeat and then just get off the phone and cry. After about a week, they were like, okay, he's stable enough for him to come home. I packed up me and Sarah, and we drove across Germany, 4.5 hours away, to go pick him up. And I was so excited to see him. I remember being so excited. And the second I walked into the room, I knew he wasn't there anymore. The person that I married, the person that I loved, was gone. That person died somewhere in Afghanistan. And the person in front of me was someone who was very, very much chock full of medication, just like I was warned about, to stabilize him. And I got to bring him home. From there, he went through this process of mandatory therapy, and I decided that I needed to start talking to someone because I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know who to talk to. And I decided to start talking to a counselor myself, just to be able to vent out all of the things that were inside of me. And it was during this time I found out I was pregnant with number 2. So I am pregnant. I have a 18-month or 14-month-old at the time, and then a husband who is incapable of taking care of himself. So we do everything we can to keep some sense of normalcy, but I become extremely hypervigilant. I start checking places to make sure there's not going to be any excessive triggers. I become very hyper-focused on his care. And we made the decision with leadership that we were going to move to Kentucky to a warrior transition unit, and he was going to get out of the military. He got everything done and said, and we got everything packed up the best we could. I remember we all came down with the stomach virus like the day before we were supposed to fly out. And I was 27 weeks pregnant at the time whenever we flew back to Kentucky. Sam had taken way too many Valium, like way too many. So he was like he was super stressed and ready to jump out the plane window. Sarah was getting sick in the car seat next to me, and I remember my nose started bleeding, and I was pregnant, and I rang the thing for the flight attendant to bring me a napkin, and she literally brought me one. And that was just so many of like the times I just felt so helpless. Like, what do? I'm sitting here having my circulation cut off with my hand, with one hand, and I'm catching puke in the other hand. I have blood running down my face. I'm just like, ugh. So we get back, we get Sam settled. We decide for the time being that we're going to have him stay in the dorms there, or in the barracks. And I was going to go back to Tennessee for a little bit. After a couple months, I realized that just wasn't going to work. So we moved into military family housing, waiting for our stuff to get there. We became hermits. Everything became walking on eggshells, hermit life. We never left. The only time I really left was for grocery store or for prenatal appointments. I was sick, so sick with number two's pregnancy. During this time, we have no access to church. And you know, I have the guilt of not going to church, not taking my kids to church, being told I should be in church, that why am I not taking Sam to church because that's where he's going to get the most help. Trying churches and having Sam being told, well, you just need to pray this way, you're not praying hard enough, you have a demon on you. It just became this mess. And honestly, this, from probably mid-pregnancy, a good year and a half after that, I have very spotty. I went into survival mode, completely disassociated, and just survived. Number two was a elective C-section, really smooth. I came home, was not prepared for, was borderline postpartum psychosis on top of having 2 kids and a husband with PTSD. I remember the postpartum psychosis making me want to smother my child, making me want to do all these things, made me extremely paranoid that things were coming after me, things were trying to take Sam away from me. I remember feeling so heavily guilty because my nursing wasn't working, and number two was, by 6 weeks, she was borderline failure to thrive. I had switched to formula. There was just all these things that, looking back, should not have mattered, but they did because it was a big deal. I started getting consistent therapy then. It was there that worked on transitioning out of the military, and we decided to stay in Kentucky. 8 months have passed since number two was born. We officially are out. We moved into a house in the next town over. I started working at this little mommy store with a midwife, and just enough just to get myself out of the house. At the time, I found out I was pregnant with number 3. Very much a surprise. Number 2 was only 8 months old whenever I found out. And we decided to, for working with the midwife, I didn't want another C-section. I was really afraid of having another C-section so close to the one before that, so I decided to have a home birth. Much to a lot of people's angst, but I did a lot of research, and I was really confident in my decision, and I was really confident in my midwife. During this time, it was a lot of the same, a lot of reactionary things, a lot of anger and throwing things and disappearing, and just a lot of trauma that happened during those years. After number 3 was born in November, we decided to look at having a change. And so we looked at moving to Montana because my dad had a successful hotel there. I wanted to be close to my mom. I hadn't been around my mom in a very long time. I've seen her maybe 3 times since I'd moved out. And I really wanted to be close to them. Sam had a good opportunity there inside the hotel business, so we made the decision to move to Montana. And that decision was met with a lot of opposition from some family. That was really hard to deal with too, because whenever you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to do at the time, and you're getting nothing but angst and very much no support, especially with someone who's very dependent on his family, it's really hard. But we moved to Montana. Everything seems to be good for a time. You know, it seems nice. But then things hit the fan. Find out this whole time, little did we know, my dad had started drinking again. He had lost his church a few years back and moved to Miles City, so we moved to Miles City as well. So there, the drinking had gotten so bad that it was starting to become a lot of other issues. So with us living there, we got pulled into the abuse and the toxicity of the situation. We would get voicemails and emails and text messages telling us how bad or worthless or awful we are, or how we're out of God's will and rebellious, and how we just same things I dealt with as a kid. And on top of that, the guilt that I carried of not being able to help the situation and fix it. And on top of that, having Sam dealing with stuff and still dealing seriously with his PTSD, it got to the point that I hit an extreme low. Postpartum depression after my number 3. I got to the point where I would just sit on my porch and think, what would it be like if I jumped off the 3rd floor? I wouldn't have to worry anymore. I wouldn't have to care about it anymore. It was in that moment that Sam made the decision that we should move back. It was at this time that his grandmother was struggling really bad with Alzheimer's, and his mom was her primary caregiver, and we used that as an excuse to move back. That move was very difficult. I had started establishing my doula and lactation business. We had a very good job at the hospital. I was close to my mom, and it was a very hard move. That moved us into a situation where I felt very out of place. And that's something I'll talk about in part 3, because after this stint, like, there's a whole nother chapter that begins. So if you've held on this long, I know I've really rambled, but I really appreciate you guys listening to me so far. The support and the comments, and just knowing that many of you resonate with this story and that it's helping you just means so much to me. And again, if you like what I'm doing, if you enjoy what I'm doing, if you like, the survivor stories or the deep dives, things that I'm going into, check out the other playlists or the other videos. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, all that fun stuff to help show some support to the channel. Remember my challenge to get to 500 subscribers so I can do the Hot Ones challenge, which I'm like so paranoid about. Until next time, my friends, everyone has a story. What is yours?